We are choked with news and starved of history. Will Durant. Things look pretty bad right now. My relationship with gin, or Vishnia, depending on the season, tends to wax or wane with my reactions to the state of the world. A personal foible that led to the discovery of a bit of decoration with empty alcohol bottles. But as we often say here, humans have only a limited number of scripts with which to build our stories, and Oscar Wilde already delivered the insights of alcohol and truth. After the first glass, you see things as you wish they were. After the second glass, you see things as they are not. After the final glass, you see things as they really are, and that is the most horrible thing in the world. So, through which glass are we seeing the world right now? Are current events what we wish the world to be, or are we seeing current events as they are not? I don't think we are seeing things as they really are yet, because we can never truly understand history while we're living through it. In a world of amazing advances in technology and medical fields and in access to knowledge, things have never been better. But we're still in despair. Institutions are no longer trusted, and we harbor massive suspicions about our neighbors, personally and on a global level. None of this happened in a vacuum. And as a history company, I am not going to get into the causes and effects of the current crises. What I will do is go back to another time in history that looked an awful lot like the current day. As usual, everything old is new again. There was a time when it was a massive leap forward in technology. Human living conditions skyrocketed. Medical advances abounded. Entirely new political systems were envisioned. And there was more literacy and more literacy developing than any other previous time by orders of magnitude. But it was also a time of general unrest. Tensions were not merely present between nations, but within nations as well. Assassinations were constant and rampant, even as general lawlessness decreased in most places. A professional influencer class emerged as more and more people became literate, but instead of bringing people together, it seemed to separate, isolate, and radicalize groups even more. I'm speaking, as you've probably already figured out, about the years leading directly to World War I. But honestly, if I were writing this in 1913, I would probably have referred to the late 1700s and early 1800s. Things have happened before, and they'll happen again. Humans have only a limited number of scripts to follow. The common lesson of World War I is that it began with 2 shots next to a bridge in Sarajevo. And that was truly the spark that began the conflict, but it didn't need to be. Truthfully, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were merely the latest in a decades-long string of high-level assassinations. There were multiple prime ministers shot in Bulgaria, Greece, Russia, Serbia, and Spain. Multiple members of royal houses were assassinated in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Serbia, and Austria. We won't even get into the assassination attempts, but when a bomb was thrown at the wedding of the Spanish king in 1906, it didn't kill any of the royal family. It did kill 24 people watching along the route, but the new Queen of Spain married her husband with bloodstains on her wedding dress. Nor was the assassination trend limited to European powers. 3 US presidents were assassinated in this same time frame, with one former president the target of an attempted assassination that didn't stop his speech giving. The Queen of Korea was assassinated, as well as the Shah of Iran, the former Prime Minister of Japan, and the Prime Minister-elect of China. And this list I just gave you was merely the top of the assassination heap. There were governors, governors general, ministers, deputies, influential authors, and some guys who talk too much politics at the local pub. And right in the middle of the entire fray were the writers and lecturers calling both sides to action. Before there was TikTok, there was a thriving business in selling newspapers, pamphlets, and charging people to listen to rousing speeches about how the other guy sucked and what is to be done. The Central Cafe in Vienna, still open for business today, was ground zero for much of these discussions, and I think the genesis of the joke that begins, Hitler, Lenin, Tito, and Freud walk into a bar. Oh wait, that's not a joke, it's actual history. But, and history loves butts as much as Sir Mix-a-Lot, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand wasn't even the last important assassination to affect World War I before it started. That assassination happened in Paris in a cafe that still exists named Café du Croissant. Jean Jaurès was a political leader in France, an elected deputy of the French National Assembly, the head of the French Socialist Party, a prolific author, founder of Humanité newspaper, which is still publishing, and a tireless public speaker who regularly pulled in thousands of people to hear him discuss the rights of workers and the evils of war. And in July of 1914, there was no doubt that war was coming. Jaurès had recently given a speech about that very threat, where he said, "What will the future be like when the billions now thrown away in preparation for war are spent on useful things to increase the well-being of people, on the construction of decent houses for workers, on improving transportation, on reclaiming the land?" The fever of imperialism has become a sickness. It's the disease of a badly run society which does not know how to use its energies at home. To stave off this war, Jaurès had called for a workers' strike in both France and Germany, international solidarity designed to appeal to those who would do most of the fighting and dying on both sides. He had a close ally in this endeavor, Joseph Caillou. Caillou's wife had been the choicest gossip for several months, overshadowing even the murder of an Austrian archduke, as she had murdered the editor of Le Figaro in March of 1914, and her trial had just ended. That trial had kept Jaurès and Caillou from releasing some absolutely explosive news they had uncovered: that the French president, Raymond Poincaré, had his political campaign subsidized by Russia. Jaurès had previously described the president as more Russian than Russia, and was absolutely sure that the rush to war in France was being driven by a secret treaty supported by a huge influx of Russian funds in the French political system, and which also supported a rather large number of French pundits who were screaming for entry into the war to take back the Alsace-Lorraine. It was this web of French punditry that had inspired a 29-year-old archaeology student to follow Jaurès throughout Paris, keeping a notebook of incoherent thoughts on the daily routines and habits, and finally, to extend a pistol through the window of the Café du Croissant and fired 2 shots, which killed the French activist nearly immediately. Raoul Villain was a French nationalist, and he had been eagerly consuming the fiery oratory and writings of those baying for revenge on Germany. Indeed, calling for the deaths of various activists and or leaders was not limited to targeting Joyeux. Lenin's own brother had been executed for plotting the Tsar of Russia's execution, and Lenin didn't stint to call for violent actions against the upper classes. Everyone in a leadership position on every side of the issues was a target of someone else. There were calls to action on every side. Although Joyeux was fighting to stop the unfolding war, by July 31st, 1914, the date of his assassination, war was inevitable. And it was for the very reasons he had outlined earlier. Citizens, the note which Austria has sent to Serbia is full of threats. And if Austria invades Slavic territory, if the Austrians attack the Serbs, we can foresee Russia's entry into the war. If Russia intervenes, Austria, confronted by 2 enemies, will invoke her treaty of alliance with Germany. And Germany has informed the powers through her ambassadors that she will come to the aid of Austria. But then it is not only the Austro-German alliance which will come into play, but also the secret treaty between Russia and France. Think of what disaster would mean for Europe. What a massacre, what destruction, what barbarism. The massacre, destruction, and barbarism all came to pass as foretold. Historians love a good counterfactual, and there is a lot of discussion on what might have been different if Joyeux had not been killed. The war would not have been stopped. In fact, Germany's plans were set. It declared war on France on August 3rd, just 3 days after Joyeux' assassination, and invaded Belgium on August 4th. Even had Joyeux lived, the war would have come. And with the coming of the war, the French Sacred Union was agreed upon, with even the noted communist Edouard Vaillant saying, in the face of aggression, socialists will do their duty for the fatherland, for the republic, for internationality. But it's possible that in 1917, when the war was going very badly for the French and a mutiny began amongst the troops, which was kind of inspired by the revolution in Russia, had Joyeux lived, he might have changed the war's outcome. His strident belief in socialism and his absolute hatred of war, combined with his tremendous gift for writing and oration, may have come into effect at that point. But then again, his ally Joseph Caillou attempted to bring up those things during mutiny in 1917 and was convicted of treason and jailed. So perhaps the course of the war itself was already set as well. All thanks to, probably, Mark Twain for our constant saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. The course of the future is not clearly mapped at this moment. And just because a pattern has existed in the past does not make it inevitable today. In fact, it's possible that with the mere act of understanding this cycle in motion, we can change everything. If we're going to be quoting influential thinkers, we might want to include John and Sarah Connor. There's no fate but what we make. That applies to human history as well as the fight against sentient robots.
What to do